USSR territory is now located on the African continent. The USA, having drawn up an alliance with Great Britain, is now occupying the western coast of South America.
I've been covering some good-ass games on this channel lately, so it's time for a real stinker. Cuban Missile Crisis is a 2005 real-time strategy made by some company you've never heard of and will never hear of again. It's a Cold War gone hot kind of scenario, with the usual suspects duking it out. The game is basically Total War World War III, or Red Alert Total War, something like that. You initiate battles in the turn-based strategic layer and then fight them in RTS mode. And that sounds fun, doesn't it? The foreign perspective on the Cold War is interesting, and the graphics are nice. So, how come you've never heard about this game before? Well, let's see if we can solve that mystery. The TLDR version is that the Cuban Missile Crisis went bad. The Europeans side with the Americans, China sides with the USSR, Mao gets killed in a retaliatory strike. The nuclear exchange leads to hundreds of millions of deaths all over the world. We have 4 playable militaries. First, there is the American-British-Australian alliance. These guys get access to both American and British units, so Pattons, Chaffees, M103s, but also Centurions, Conquerors, and Meteor jets. Very nice. Although I do think the Soviets are a lot more interesting for one simple reason. At no point of the Cold War did the Russians have an advantage in terms of ships or aircraft, but the ground forces were another matter. The early Cold War USSR used to field some of the most innovative and technologically advanced tank designs in the world. Now, in real life, the Soviets never got to exploit this advantage before permanently losing it a decade later. Well, that's what video games are for. Another faction is the Franco-German-European Alliance. Unit-wise, this is a curiously diverse army. We begin with old American Land-Lease stuff and the surviving Nazi equipment, Panzer IVs, Shermans, Jagdpanthers, and even Czech Hedzers. Look at this cutie. If you are so inclined, you can play these guys as sort of a non-Nazi Wehrmacht. The Europeans have access to early Cold War British machines like the Centurion. The tech tree culminates with advanced French tank and aircraft designs. There is a little bit of everything. While the rest of the world is committed to World War III, China is still fighting World War II. The Chinese begin the campaign with IS-2s, Kursk-era short-gun T-34s, as well as upgraded IL-2s for close air support. In the first Chinese operation, you defend against an opportunistic Soviet attack. You get to defeat them using second-hand Russian stuff. That's funny. Eventually, the Chinese get the domestically produced Tiananmen Square tank. So this is a low-rent Total War kind of game. There are these heavily scripted story missions, but in order to get to them, you need to fight a bunch of randomly generated filler battles. The strategy layer can look intimidating at first, but it's actually very simple. This is where you build stacks, move them around, and repair wounded units. It's really all you do. There is almost no economy to speak of.
All military facilities and strategic resources are only protected from the attacks of their immediate neighbors.
Make a mental note of this map. It's going to become important once we get to the expansion. The game has some very curious ideas about how the economy works. The reason why the nations still keep on waging war is to capture factories and storage facilities. The human element is disregarded completely. The economy is about factories, and the more factories there are, the more economical it is. Many Russians who grew up in the 60s and 70s share this view of the world. Before purchasing Cuban Missile Crisis, I consulted the wisdom of Steam reviews, and there were quite a lot of complaints about the bad translation. This actually ended up positively impacting my decision to buy the game, because I love bad translations. Was I disappointed? A little, yeah. Most of the text was translated from Russian by a professional, and it's fine. But then there are weird mistakes here and there. Some of these are annoying, others are comical. For example, the game keeps referring to medium tanks as middle tanks. T-34 middle tank, Panzer IV middle tank. That's because in Russian, medium and middle are the same word. Tank destroyers are called tank chasers. What the fuck? I have no idea why. Chasing tanks is exactly what they don't do. The writing quality is surprisingly not terrible. It's all done in this dry, matter-of-fact style, like you are reading a history textbook. The game is not a real simulation, but it's certainly more realistic than, say, Company of Heroes. Units have a bunch of stats: front armor, rear armor, even upper armor, which is relevant when they are being shot by planes or artillery. Vehicles need to be rearmed and refueled. Ambulances provide medical assistance to infantry. You know, there are all kinds of factors that are important in evaluating tank performance in battle, but there is one variable that stands above the rest. Well, at least according to some meta-research of World War II tank combat I've read back when I was obsessed with this stuff. Supposedly, in tank battles, whoever could see the other guy first usually won. Vision is a critical resource in most strategy games, and that is just realistic. This is also when this game begins to violently fall apart. The units are blind, and most of them can shoot much further than they can see. The units in the game seem to possess a hidden camouflage stat, making them harder to detect unless they fire or move. This greatly favors the defender, and the game provides barely any tools to gain vision. Infantry squads come with officers that have binoculars, a useful tool for sure, but unreliable because of the aforementioned camo mechanics. There are recon planes and helicopters. I've never managed to successfully use one of those without it getting instantly murderized by AAA batteries that I couldn't see. Despite being the single most important stat, the vision radius is not displayed anywhere on the unit information page. The European faction begins the campaign with access to a type of an armored car that can see further than your typical tank. I discovered this via trial and error, and these units are just barely adequate. Sometimes, instead of blowing up a vehicle, you kill the crew inside. Enemy vehicles can be captured by infantry. After the mission is over, these get automatically exchanged for resource points, or whatever the currency is called. As you can see here, one of my tanks ran out of gas. Good thing the game provides a fuel truck at the start of every level. So let's refuel my tank. Yeah, so you should really plan the battles so that they're done before you run out of fuel. Rearming during a mission is not viable either. It costs too many ammunition points to rearm, and it takes too long. For this reason, you will never touch the supply truck in filler missions, and you might do it once or twice in story levels. You get more supply vehicles in these, and there are more targets to shoot at. I'm not sure how the game deals with armor penetration from a math standpoint, but it all seems to be mostly random. Sometimes tanks will one-shot each other. In other instances, they will bounce round after round off each other's asses, doing zero damage. It's one of those games where save scumming is an essential mechanic. There is basically no AI. The bad guys will stay right where they spawned and ignore everything until they detect your troops, in which case they'll return fire and sometimes chase you. In defensive missions, the enemy will attempt to bum rush your position with all units and get slaughtered unless they outnumber you 3-1. Buildings don't block shots, like at all. Neither does terrain. You see this vehicle here? The reason why it's moving so slowly is because it's actually driving uphill. You'd assume that the presence of a hill is an important enough detail to be communicated visually, but, you know, Ivanware. I don't understand air power in this game. Every single enemy stack I've seen has a long-range air defense battery. Some of the more advanced ones fire with 100% accuracy, and the range is basically map-wide. Sure, you can take them out, but by that time the mission should be over anyway, since the batteries are always located somewhere past the enemy lines. Or, I suppose you can order the planes to do suicide runs. They'll get killed, but hopefully not before fucking up the bad guys. Or you can choose not to use planes at all, and instead invest the same resources into artillery, and blast the opponent from the other side of the map with no retaliation. Almost no retaliation. The game has a counter-artillery system. When the artillery fires, its approximate location is revealed on the minimap. Surprisingly enough, the AI can and occasionally does take advantage of this. I can't help but feel impressed when something in this garbage fire of a game actually functions correctly. I'm afraid whatever you are seeing on the screen doesn't quite communicate exactly how shitty this game is to play. The same tank battle can result in a flawless victory or a complete defeat with all your tanks spontaneously combusting seemingly at random. It never feels like it's your fault. It never feels like you were punished for making a mistake. I wish MOAS 2 had a Total War-like game mode. Hell, I wish StarCraft 2 had this game mode. How come this is not in, like, every RTS? It works so well. So this awful game you've never heard of has a sequel you've never heard of. Cuban Missile Crisis: Ice Crusade. This is where the game's story gets to red alert 2 levels of complete insanity, all while taking itself 100% completely seriously, with no attempt at satire. The year is 1967. World War III continues. The Northern Hemisphere, Europe, the US, the USSR, and even the Chinese territories became uninhabitable, creating a massive human migration southwards. A reverse refugee crisis times 1,000.
The Chinese are now living on the islands in the Pacific Ocean.
Is this Jade Empire?
The USA, having drawn up an alliance with Great Britain, is now occupying the western coast of South America.
Wait. I'm pretty sure the Moai statues are Polynesian, right? Yeah. I guess the Russians thought Polynesia was in South America. The Soviets decide that they don't have enough factories, so they invade the United States territory located in the present-day Mexico. This is the actual story, as it is explained in the manual. We don't have enough factories, so we invade Mexico and take theirs. The funny part is that the Soviets invade America from the north, i.e. from the frozen Texas. I guess that's kind of badass. The USSR and the US are the only two playable sides. There are new units, like the Americans have this thing, looks like something you'd see in World of Tanks. And then there is this flying monstrosity. It resembles one of them Nazi experimental aircraft, whatever they were called. The biggest new addition is the new Mexican tile set. According to the developers, Mexican landscape consists mostly of abandoned road vehicles and Aztec ruins. There is even less variety when it comes to maps this time. But on a positive side, you immediately get access to units with good frontal armor and decent vision radius. T-64s, that changes everything. The filler levels no longer take 30 minutes and dozens of reloads to beat. You'll be done in 5. The bad news is that there are still filler levels. In fact, I've never even made it to the first story mission because I had to go through like 40 randomly generated filler levels, and after finishing 24 or so, I just got bored. There it is, the reason why this game is sold for $1. No AI to speak of, same units, same maps, over and over again. Clearly, many talented people worked on this game. The 3D models, the animations, buildings, 2D art, it's all great. The visual style is good. I like it better than World in Conflict or Red Alert. Sure, the story setup is laughable, but it's also endearing in a strange way. Reading the obsessively detailed briefings, you get the feeling that you are inside someone's world. Someone cared about all this. Too bad this person wasn't a good game designer. I impulse bought this terrible game during the winter sale as a curiosity. I ended up paying less than $1, and to be perfectly honest, even that feels like a ripoff. If you are interested in exploring Cold War-related media, there might be something for you here, otherwise, don't bother. So, when placed on the chill cringe axis, the Missile Crisis game definitely gravitates towards extreme cringe. And mechanically, the Ivanware is just sad. Well, looks like the science is settled. Shit game from a shit publisher.